even though we all know what it's like, and we went through the exercise of like going in and looking at going in and being immersed, in person in a store, and people on this in this session, you're probably thinking like, hey, some of you are thinking it's clothing thing. Others, it may be outdoors, right? So I like REI, right? So I'm thinking of REI when I go in, when I do this now, and there is that leg up that that retail has, again, because it's in the physical space and it just naturally occupies all of someone's senses. But e-commerce, we can really curate. Now, that curation starts with, where do we find these people, right? Where is the front door for them? Like, how can we get them over to the front door? I gave you an example of a product popping up in an Instagram feed, but it really is just about understanding where the person is coming from. And then when they show up, making sure that you have the experience, machinery in place, and the data insights that you need to craft and adapt that meaningful experience. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what are we really talking about? Dollars and cents, right? Or I'm in Germany now, so I guess it would be euros and euro cents. Retail continues to grow. E-commerce revenue, certainly that increasing trend. And what I think we've seen is we did see an adjustment coming out of the pandemic from where it leapt ahead, but we kind of regressed to the mean rate of increase. But what for me is most interesting is the ever-marching increasing share worldwide that e-commerce takes, right? So it is what was predicted years and years ago, but we are continuing to see e-commerce really be a major channel for driving value. Now, why do I bring this up? I bring it up, well, because one, I'm in the e-commerce business, right? But I bring it up because as more and more people are getting more and more of their stuff through online transactions, we have a continuing of what I call the arms race, the engagement arms race. And this might be a little bit historical or hysterical for some of you, but if you go back to like 2006, there was this thing called Urchin Analytics, right? And Urchin Analytics eventually became another product altogether. You know it today as Google Analytics, right? But what was happening back then is, with the advent of that service, all of a sudden, people could merchandisers, merchants, agencies, whoever's in charge of running the store, could do split tests and multivariate tests, right? So we're looking at, well, hey, if we change the color of the add to cart button, does that show half the people green and half the people red? Does that move the needle at all? Okay, oh yes, it does. Wow, cool. Or we'll check this copy, or we'll check this price against the normal version, or we'll have multivariate, multiple options, and you quickly get this feedback. You quickly get to see what's happening. You get to see the little treatments, the little changes that make a difference and move the needle. Now that started, for me, that was the start of the arms race, right? Because that meant that people were going to build more and more impactful, more tailor-made experiences for their audience in order to increase average order value, or increase the increase sales, increase customer fealty to the brand, right? Well, that trend, all it has done is just wound ever tighter in and quickened into this just like virtuous and maybe sometimes scary cycle of iterative engagement, right? And as we see the trend of e-commerce taking more and more of the total share of sales, you're going to see more and more experiences be conceived, be put in place. And then the interesting that happens is, once someone has a novel experience, right? They roll it out, it makes headlines, it's amazing, and then in almost no time, it becomes the new normal, right? So we're constantly iterating up the level and sophistication of the engagement. And I have some thoughts about actually, how AI, it has to be discussed, even though I think it's getting talked about a lot these days. We might all be collectively experiencing a little bit of AI hype burnout. But I think a practical assessment is that we'll see we'll see the effects of AI in the customer journey space, but diffusely. And we can chat more about that later. So what I really like about online commerce is that you can target the right audiences, and you can pick where you are sort of showing them, hey, here's the door into our brand, here's the door into this particular product, or whatever the case may be. And the cool thing is, you don't this kind of engagement, it should scale, and it should scale more than just putting bodies in a retail store. So let's look at how we take the experience that people know from the physical world and apply it to the digital world. The obvious one, and I intentionally didn't put any pictures here because the obvious one is site, right? The tools for people with no or limited visibility. My sister has some issues with her visual acuity, so I'm well aware that the web does actually adapt pretty well outside of being purely a cited medium, right? But site is the obvious thing because people come to the website, they're browsing through your catalog, whether it's tools or fashion or food or whatever, and they are seeing these things, or maybe if they are visually impaired, they're at least hearing the description of it. But that's the obvious case, right? But what I actually have at the end of this presentation are, I think, some fantastic examples of taking the visual experience of the product and actually making it really come alive in the customer's hands, or at the very least in their own space. Now, sound. Now, I will go ahead and set the stage that absolutely under no circumstances should you go to a website and have it start saying things or playing things at you, right? That's a no-no. We all remember the days of MySpace and GeoCities sites, but I think sound can be used really, really well. And I actually really, really like Athletic Greens, their approach to advertisement, right? And so one of the things that I really like with this example, so this was from my TikTok. I'm just a consumer of the TikToks. But I a lot of times as I'm just brainlessly, scrolling through the feed, I realize, like, wait, I'm being advertised to, and I'm Gen X, right? So we don't really like to be advertised to. I mean, we like to be advertised to, but you can't be overtly advertising to us, right? So this Athletic Greens approach is to have this first person point of view, right? So still some of that visual element. This person, the person that is in this ad is actually just talking through, saying, like, hey, this is what I really like about this. It's almost conversational, even though it's a one-sided, it's a monologue, right? But it feels very conversational. And the nice thing is, like, it really gets into your head, and you start to have, if you think about it, you actually start to have, in hearing someone else's story, whether you agree with what their observations or not, you start to evaluate your own story against that. So I'm actually a really big fan of using sound, and using especially a conversational approach to selling products. Now, I don't necessarily need it for a cheap ballpoint pen, but if I were an artist, or if I were a constant writer, hand writer of notes, then yeah, probably the same approach would work, right? Smell. Now, this one was really interesting for me to think about, because if you if you think about it, there is no smell-o-vision. We still, I felt like growing up watching the Jetsons that there would be, jet cars and smell-o-vision and everything else. But if you look at this picture, this Yankee Candle, I can damn near smell that candle, right? It's chocolate cake. I can smell chocolate cake. My wife buys these candles. I come home and I'm like, hey, hon, great chocolate cake. No chocolate cake, just a damn candle. But this for me, again, the sense of smell is just, it's such a fundamental, foundational sense. And the more that you can, when appropriate, evoke sense of smell, even through a visual medium like visual or auditory medium like the web. So whether someone's describing the smell or you're seeing a picture like this, that can really establish a sense of realness to this product that's just sitting on someone's screen somewhere. So big fan of smell. Now taste also we don't have taste division yet either, but this is actually one of my favorite pizza restaurants in the world. It's in a little tiny town called Salerno, Italy. But in their stories, they do a really, really good job of focusing in on the ingredients and really drawing you into the moment. And I can 100% smell that pizza. I can taste that pizza. I've actually had that very same pizza. And when it is, again, when it applies to the product, reminding people of what it is they're going to get, basically helping them picture not just the image, but the lived reality, the experience of that product in their home. Well, you're going to establish the kind of relationship where people are going to come back and tell their friends, order more. And then we have touch. I am a big fan, especially when it comes to fashion. I'm not a very fashionable person, besides like branded shirts. But I fell in love. I live at the beach on the East Coast US, and I fell in love with these swimsuit bathing trunks, we call them. And they got me, I think they got me on Facebook, but one of the things that they did really, really well was they presented not just like, hey, here's your swimsuit and it comes in these colors. So like, hey, this is the material. And you could go in, you could actually see them stretching the material. You could see someone, sort of wiping their hand. It actually has a really, really nice, not uncomfortable, inner legging thing that just, it's amazing, right? But you see their website, they have amazing detail showing you the fibers, and then also what they do is they tell the story because they're partially made from reclaimed ocean plastic. But one of the things that they're going for is solving the problem of like, hey, if you're especially in salt water and you're out and it's 38 degrees Celsius and humidity is about 100%. Well, it doesn't take long for that experience to really just get uncomfortable, right? And that's the problem that they solve with their bathing suits. So, but in order to really convince me that that's what was happening, they hit me with, this is the feel of the fabric. This is video of the fabric's performance. And I basically felt like I had a tactile relationship with this thing before I even received my first pair.